when I hear the name Dr. Edward Hallowell, just a year ago, before my diagnosis, his name would not have meant anything. And now I think I'm so familiar with his name because I've heard it name dropped in podcasts I listen to, spoken about in conversation as though he's a friend. His Twitter bio states that he is a psychiatrist, an ADHD expert, an author, a podcast host, and a speaker. But personally, I know him to be the author of ADHD 2.0, which is a book that was constantly recommended to me when I was first diagnosed. It's written by Dr. Hallowell himself, together with co-author Dr. John Ratey, and it features essential strategies, to minimize the downside and maximize the benefits of living with ADHD at any age. So basically, how to go beyond simply coping or surviving with ADHD, but how to thrive. With that, I will let Dr. Hallowell take the stage, and we'll catch up with him again in about 10 minutes.
Well, hello. I was going to say good morning, but I know it's not morning where you are. It's morning where I am, just outside of Boston. And I just must tell you, it is a thrill for me to join you all. The idea of reaching halfway around the globe to Singapore, it takes my breath away. And I just have to thank Moon Lake, whose name I love, Moon Lake Lee, and her wonderful team of people for allowing me the opportunity to share with you a few points about this fascinating condition. I hope and pray that you all in Singapore will learn as much as you can about what's called ADHD, because it can truly change your life. There is no condition in all of medicine, the diagnosis of which can more immediately and dramatically change your life for the better, no matter what age you are, than the diagnosis of ADHD. It's very high stakes poker because this condition can, on the one hand, ruin your life, lead you to an early death or a life of frustration and underachievement, if not drug addiction, incarceration, unemployment, and misery. Or it can take you to the very top. And we have Nobel Prize winners who have ADHD. We have self-made millionaires and billionaires. We have, you name the field, and I can name you someone in that field who's at the very top of it. And isn't that interesting? That something can be so dramatically a force for good or terrible outcomes in a person's life. I have this condition myself, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. My wife, Sue, and I have 3 children, and they all, the bio says 2 out of 3, all 3 out of 3 have inherited this condition from me, and they're thriving. They're now 33, 30, and 27, Lucy, Jack, and Tucker, and they are the stars in my sky, along with my wife, Sue. So what, in a few sentences, what is this condition? Well, first of all, let's start with the name. It's a terrible name. It's completely inaccurate. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Goodness me, who would want that? I have that condition, but I do not have a deficit of attention, nor do any of us who have ADHD. We have an abundance of attention. Our challenge is to control it. If we had a deficit of attention, there would be a form of dementia, which it most certainly is not. Our minds are going a mile a minute. As I like to say, we have a Ferrari engine for a brain. We've got a turbo-powered, incredibly powerful brain. It's just that our brakes are not strong enough to slow it down. So it runs away with us. We have a runaway brain, or we're constantly coming up with new ideas, going off on tangents, burrowing down rabbit holes. And some of those rabbit holes end up with a Nobel Prize. As Kary Mullis, who won the Nobel Prize for inventing the PCR test, the polymerase chain reaction, which we use now to diagnose COVID. He won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for that. And he had massive ADHD, as do so many others. So the name itself is completely misleading. And I don't see it as a disorder. I see it as a trait. Can it be a disorder? Yes. As I said, it can ruin your life. The prisons are full of people with undiagnosed, untreated ADD. So are the halls of the addicted and the unemployed. But at the same time, so are the halls of the massively talented, the creative, the original, the people who think outside the box. Whoever invented the wheel certainly had ADHD, or what we, misleadingly call ADHD. So take it seriously, learn about it. If you have it or a child of yours has it, getting it diagnosed can set that person on fire in a good way. Really what having this, imagine Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls is a huge waterfall in the United States. And you stand there and you look at it, and it's this torrent, this massive amount of power and noise and mist, and it's beautiful to behold, but it's nothing more than that. It's a beautiful to behold wonder of nature. However, if you build a hydroelectric plant, then you can light up the state of New York. And I'm in the hydroelectric plant business. If you imagine the mind of ADD like Niagara Falls, what you need to do is build your hydroelectric plant. You need to find a way to plug in that titanic energy, power, brilliance, creativity into life in such a way that you produce something of value. And that's what I do for a living. I show people how to do that. I write books about it. I'm talking to you all about it. But it begins with your understanding this is not a disorder. It's another word in the label that's so misleading. It's a trait. It's like having blonde hair or being left-handed. It's a trait, which if you learn how to manage properly, becomes an enormous asset. If you don't, as I said, it can be a terrible liability. And I was very moved by the people whose short video clips you saw. It can slow you down considerably. So I have renamed it in my last book, Variable Attention Stimulus Trait. Variable Attention Stimulus Trait. And I call it a trait because if you manage it right, it becomes a huge asset. And that's what I'm in the business of doing. It's usually a little bit of both. And so my job is to maximize the asset part and minimize the disorder part. Variable attention stimulus trait, vast. And this is a vast, vast condition. It takes in every aspect of your life. The stereotype is of little boys who are bouncing off the wall in school. But that's very misleading because just think of the Nobel Prize winners. Now, the core triad of symptoms, and let me explain this. The way the diagnostic manual defines this condition is in terms of three ways of being in the world. Number one, distractibility. Number two, impulsivity. And number three, hyperactivity. Now take each one of those and stand it on its head, and you get an incredible asset that you can't buy and you can't teach. So what's the flip side of distractibility? It's curiosity. And that's what drives us ADHDers. What's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? Well, that looks like you're very distractible, but in fact, you're very curious. If you didn't care what that noise was or what was in that Petri dish, then you wouldn't look at it. You wouldn't be what people call distractible, but you also wouldn't discover penicillin, and you wouldn't discover the polymerase chain reaction, and you wouldn't come up with a new idea for the business you're about to start that will change the world. That's the flip side of distractibility, curiosity, and we are turbo curious. The second one, impulsivity. Think about it for a minute. What is creativity but impulsivity gone right? You don't plan to have an earth-shattering idea. You don't plan to say, okay, today I'm going to come up with the brilliant idea that will change the world. No, new ideas, creative ideas pop. They come out of nowhere in between our ears. That's the land of nowhere. Well, the next thing you know, nowhere becomes somewhere and you have a new idea, but you didn't intend to have it. It popped impulsively. creativity depends upon some level of disinhibition. If we didn't have somewhat faulty brakes, we wouldn't be creative. So you don't want to tighten up your brakes so tight that you don't allow in new ideas. And that's the juggling act, you know. So some degree of disinhibition, some degree of impulsivity is what leads to creativity. Now, granted, most of the new ideas we come up with aren't going to go anywhere, but the one that does will change the world. So what you want to learn how to do is take advantage of, channel, marshal, organize this flood of new ideas that you have every day. And then the third one, hyperactivity, you get to be my age. I'm 72 years old. It's called energy. It allows me to join you early in the morning and talk to you early in the evening in Singapore, for goodness sake. What a wonderful thing it is. But I'm very grateful for that energy pack on my back. And you know, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I think I'm coming to the end of the time I was given to speak to you all. And so let me just close by saying just what a thrill it is for me, honestly, to be with you all the way from Boston to Singapore and to be bringing you such a good news message. You know, we hear a lot of bad news these days. This is entirely good news. This is a key that can unlock a door to a much better life for your children, for you, for your business, for your family, for the entire world of Singapore, not to mention the world itself. Learn about it, seek help for it, speak to Moonlake and her wonderful troupe, and learn how to unlock the secrets and mine the treasures in your mind. I don't treat disabilities. I help people unwrap their gifts. And that's what this is all about. People with this condition have gifts embedded in their brains. And the adventure of life is really to get at those treasures, to mine those treasures, to unwrap those gifts. Well, thank you for your attention, and I'll hand it back to my friend Moonlake.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hallowell. Thank you for a very insightful and very optimistic reframing of ADHD. So we're going to have a short conversation with Dr. Hallowell. We'll ask him a few questions. Then if you guys have any questions, please put them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You're right, Dr. Hallowell. You know, you started off the conversation saying that ADHD is basically, it's a very paradoxical condition, right? I mean, at its best, you can thrive, and at its worst, it can be very debilitating. So I want to start to angle this conversation around how context and environment can actually kind of worsen or help your ADHD symptoms get better. So my question would be, do you think that thriving with ADHD is largely context dependent? And does one's immediate environment or even, you know, social culture result in vastly different experiences of ADHD? And if you could share with some examples, that'd be great.
Oh, absolutely. Like everything in life, where you are, how you're treated, the culture you live in makes all the difference in the world. If you go to a school that runs on fear and punishment and performance on demand, you're not going to do well. Fear really is the great learning disability, not ADHD or dyslexia, both of which I have. And I thrived in school, graduated from Harvard with high honors. So, but had I been afraid, then I would have failed. And so a fear-based culture, classroom, business, home, absolutely extinguishes learning. As my old friend Priscilla Vale used to say, emotion is the on-off switch for learning. Not IQ, not how much money you have. It's how you feel. And so, indeed, businesses, families, classrooms that have an atmosphere of trust, where it's okay to make a mistake, and an atmosphere of exploration and discovery and curiosity, that's where people with this condition thrive. So, absolutely, yes, the environment matters a lot. The positive, affirmative, low fear, high trust environments, people thrive. the high fear, low trust environments, people wither.
So aside from those factors, which I think we can all say that we have some degree of control over how much fear the environment has, or whether we're kind of supportive of people with ADHD at home, in the workplace, in schools. But do you think there are certain factors that are out of our control that kind of lead to someone with ADHD having a higher chance of thriving? For instance, if you're born into a more financially privileged situation, could these kind of affect how you deal with certain symptoms of ADHD? Maybe, for instance, emotional dysregulation. With a lot more resources at hand, would you say it's easier for someone with social support, with a certain degree of privilege, to manage the ADHD? And if so, how can people without this privilege get by?
Well, probably the biggest uncontrollable moment occurs when the sperm meets the egg and the genetic die is cast. So this is a genetically mediated condition, and what genes you inherit, which you have no control over, makes a big difference. So making the most out of the genetic material you're given is that's sort of the job one. Having money, sure, having money makes life easier in every way. But believe me, there are plenty of wealthy people who are miserably unhappy. And there are many people who don't have much money who are absolutely thriving. And the difference is the element that I call connection. I call it the other vitamin C, vitamin connect. And this world, at least in the United States, it's fast disappearing. We're more and more isolated. Loneliness is a big problem in the United States anyway. The Surgeon General named it the #1 medical problem we face. What you want to do for yourself, for your children, for your business, is develop a richly connected environment. And that anyone can do, regardless of how much money. Now, if you live in abject poverty, then that's a big problem. If you literally can't get food, can't get shelter, can't get medical care, all bets are off. You got to address those basic necessities first. But once you get above the level of poverty, then if you create a positively connected environment for yourself, for your child, for your business, for your family, for Singapore, you will thrive. Connection, vitamin C, vitamin connect, is the major fertilizer for life. If we get enough of that every day, we will thrive, because it naturally leads you to do the other things, to explore, to develop, to grow, to try, to exert, to stretch, all of the things that lead to growth. But you can't do that if you're low on connection. Now, the beauty of connection is it's free and it's infinite in supply. The problem with connection is people don't take it seriously enough. They think of, well, I've got to go to an expensive school, or I've got to hire an expensive tutor, or I've got to get some magical treatment that costs $1,000 a day. And that's fool's gold. You're barking up the wrong tree. What you need most of all, connection, is right there in front of you. The person walking down the street has connection to give, and you have connection to offer in return. So sure, money helps everything, but it is not the key.
Yeah, and I think one of the places that we can build connection is in the workplace. So I want to find out from you, how would you define a workplace that is embracing of neurodiversity? And I'm coming from the point of view, because I think in Singapore, at least in the Singapore context, not just our embracing or acceptance of neurodiversity, but I think our understanding of neurodiversity still has a long way to go. We're still at its infancy. So in your opinion, how would you kind of define what true workplace acceptance of neurodiversity looks like in an Asian context, in Singapore specifically?
Well, it's the not only acceptance, but embracing, celebrating of difference. That's all neurodiversity is the big buzzword jargon. And I love the word. I love neurodiversity, but it just means difference in brain, difference in mind. And thank goodness we have that. We didn't have neurodiversity, we wouldn't have Nobel Prizes. We wouldn't have creativity. We wouldn't have advances. It's the person who thinks outside the box that leads the way to the advances, and then the others follow suit. So companies like families, schools, and any organization should seek, welcome, and celebrate difference, celebrate neurodiversity. I wrote a little poem for my daughter, who's now 33, when she was 7, and it ends with the following lines. No brain is the same. No brain is the best. Each brain finds its own special way. And that's what life ought to be about. And it's up to the organizations, the businesses, the schools, the places where people go to create conditions for each brain to find its own special way. Each one of us is different from the other. There's no exact replica unless you've got an identical twin. Even then, they're different because life experiences are different. So what's so critical is that people be allowed to find their own brain's special way. And unfortunately, if you're different enough, people are so primitive that they'll ridicule you. They'll try to expel you because difference generates fear in people. And so just historically, it's people who look different, think different, are different, who are horribly mistreated, stigmatized, cast out, put to death. And instead, they should be the people that we turn to and encourage so they can find their own brain special way. Just remember, no brain is the same. No brain is the best. Each brain finds its own special way. And thank God we're moving into an era that celebrates difference. We call it neurodiversity, which makes it sound kind of intimidating, and it's a big word, but all it means is difference. And celebrate difference rather than being afraid of it.
Yeah. And you're right when you say that, places like schools and workplaces have to actually start. They have to initiate and build the right environment, basically, for an ADHD brain to thrive, or basically any neurodivergent individual to thrive. But at the same time, aside from, systemic change, I think the individual also has some kind of agency to advocate for themselves. So what advice would you give for the individual who wants to come out to their employer to say, okay, hey, I have this neurodevelopmental condition, it's ADHD. Could you, provide some accommodations, or these are some ways in which I work best? How would you advise someone in how they can disclose ADHD to someone who has no idea or doesn't know what you're talking about? How would you explain this condition about how ADHDers think and behave?
I would, if Singapore is anything like the United States, I would advise them not to. I would leave out the word ADHD. I'd leave out the diagnostic term. I wouldn't produce it at all, because for most people, it triggers a negative response. They think you're irresponsible. They think you're crazy. They think you've got a mental illness. They look at you like you're weird and not to be trusted. So I wouldn't use the term at all. Hopefully the world will become more sophisticated and knowledgeable so we can safely discuss it. But I would save that term for people who understand what it really means. But that doesn't mean you don't want to bring it up. You just don't want to use that term. So bring up your strengths and your weaknesses like you do in any workplace. I'm really good at ideas. I'm a really hard worker. I never give up. I'm very loyal. I'll innovate. I'll think on the spot. I'll stay all night if I need to. I'm not so good at sweating the details. I shouldn't be your auditor. I shouldn't be your inventory expert. I shouldn't be someone who's given the job of monitoring the details. That's not my strength. Just like being on time isn't my strength because I get lost in my thoughts. I'm busy creating something. So you want to name your strengths and your weaknesses. And by the way, lead with your strengths. Don't lead with your weaknesses. Lead with your strengths and then, in terms of accommodations, the best workplace accommodation by far is finding the right job. People try to transform the wrong job into the right job by getting these accommodations. It's like putting lipstick on a pig. It doesn't make a big difference. It's still a pig, so nothing against pigs. I love pigs, but the wrong job is the wrong job, even if you build in all kinds of accommodations. So it's like marry the right person, find the right job. Those are sort of the two keys to adult life. with or without ADD. But sometimes people overlook the obvious, and they try to micromanage a job situation into something that's good. If your heart's not in it, if you're not operating in your sweet spot, and that by that I mean doing something that you're good at, that you like to do, then look for another job. Now, don't quit your job until you've got another one lined up. I'm not saying go off half-cocked, but at the same time, I think the big picture, just like who you decide to live with, you want to pick the right person. Same thing with the job. Pick the right job, the job that fits, the job that pulls for your strengths and doesn't pull for your weaknesses. And that's the best advice. And as for bringing it up, I just wouldn't use the term. Just talk about what you're good at and what you're not so good at.
Yeah, and I think, when you were mentioning about, bringing up your strengths and weaknesses and all that. It just reminded me of how I brought up my own ADHD to my bosses and all that. And so I want to move into a little bit of questions on diagnosis specifically. At the start, when you suspect you have ADHD, I think this question comes from a lot of audience members, because I think just even suspecting you have ADHD or going about getting a diagnosis, it can be very overwhelming. What are some of your tips for the first maybe 3 things that you should do once you have a clearer picture that, okay, what I have is ADHD? What should you immediately do? Whether it's telling a friends or family, colleagues, bosses, even grounding yourself. Yeah, what should you do?
Well, that starting point is critically important because a lot of people get off on the wrong foot. And not to push my own books, but my last book, ADHD 2.0, number 1, it's only 100 pages. So I finally understood my audience. It's very short. But that book will tell you what you need to know and tell you more than most practitioners, God bless them, are able to tell you. So start with that. Start with knowledge. Start with a really solid foundation. And then, like I said, you don't have to tell people that you have the condition because most people don't understand it. Just explain what you're good at, what you're bad at, and what you want to do. And so it all begins with education. That's step number 1. And you got to take that seriously. And if you can't read or you don't want to read, have a colleague, spouse, friend read and explain it to you. Embrace it, learn about it. Critically important. Most people don't do it. And that's why they go off in wrong direction. So take step 1 very seriously. And then you want to start modifying your environment. It may be a big change like job or person you're living with, or it might be a minor change like buying the right, putting a basket next to your door where you always put your car keys so you don't lose them every day. And then as you're rearranging your environment, get a coach, someone who can help you do that, because we are not naturally good at coaching ourselves. We just aren't. That's why we leave the house. I leave my house 3 times. I have to, for everything I forgot that I have to go back in and get. And then in that context, a trial of medication makes all the sense in the world. Now, a trial of medication doesn't mean you're committing to it. It just means you're trying it out. But not to try that right away doesn't make any sense, in my opinion. It's like saying, a lot of people say to me, before we try medication, could we do a year of non-medication treatment? And I say, of course we can. And I've actually written books on how to do that. So I'm all for it. We'll do it. But it's sort of like saying, why don't we try a year of squinting before we try eyeglasses? I don't think anyone would opt for that. Well, the same thing. Why not try the very proven intervention? And mind you, these meds have been around since 1937. We're coming up on a century of experience, and that means a lot. Nothing lasts that long unless it is A, safe, and B, effective. So these meds used properly are very safe. You got to use them under the supervision of a doctor who knows what he or she is doing. But given that, they're as medications go, they're very safe. And when they work, they're a godsend. They are like eyeglasses. Suddenly you can see. You're not going through your day squinting. Or as I also like to put it, driving on square wheels. Imagine square, boom, boom, how tough that is. Well, the meds, when they work, they round out those square wheels. Now, they work about 80% of the time. And by work, I mean bring target symptom improvement with no side effects other than appetite suppression without unwanted weight loss. You usually do get appetite suppression, so you just have to be careful not to lose too much weight. But given that, a trial of medication 80% of the time will bring amazing results. And then once you have the eyeglasses, then it's a whole lot easier to rearrange your environment, to set up reminder systems, warning systems, schedules, all of that stuff that we find so difficult if you have medication on board and a coach who's been down this road many times before. Well, you're on your way to the promised land. You're on your way to big time success, not just professional success, but personal success and success on the golf course for that matter. So when you get the right treatment, every single aspect of your life improves, not just work, not just school, but your romantic life, your friendship life, your sporting life, your leisure life. You can sit by the pool more enjoyably because your mind isn't running away with you. It doesn't, however, meds do not, however, rob you of your special sauce. They do not rob you of your creativity, your originality, your charisma, elements that most of us with this condition have, and we don't want to lose. Don't worry, the meds won't do that. In fact, if the meds do anything you don't like, stop taking them. They're gone in the same day. They're in and out of your system. So remember, a trial of medication is just that. It's a trial. It's not a trial of surgery, which is irreversible. It is a trial of a medication. So it's like trying on a new pair of shoes. If you don't like them, you give them back. And if you do like them, you wear them and enjoy them and look great and feel great.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. And I just remember what I wanted to ask you. It's just ADHD. I mean, even though I'm on my meds tonight, but I just remember I wanted to ask you when you're talking about finding the right environment, right? I think for a lot of ADHDers, finding the right environment or even getting themselves to the doctor to get diagnosed requires some sense of self-love and self-belief that I want a better life. And for a lot of ADHDers who go through so much of life not diagnosed, I think there has been a lot of negative self-talk. The self-compassion is fairly lacking. And basically, you just believe that you're lazy, you can't make it in life. So how do you overcome that inner hurdle in order to even get yourself into the right environment or get yourself to the doctor to in order to lead a better life? What kind of advice do you have for self-compassion?
You follow my rule number one, which is never worry alone. If you set as your goal high self-esteem and self-love, you're going to be waiting an awful long time, because most people with ADD are low in that, certainly when they begin getting help. And if you wait to start loving yourself, it's just not going to happen. There's not a switch we can turn on that says love yourself. And I think, by the way, I think a more realistic goal is to like yourself rather than love yourself. I know an awful lot of people who love themselves who really shouldn't. And so, but a goal of liking yourself, that's something that you probably can achieve, but not instantly. And it's just a sad fact of the world of ADHD that most adults who have it, in fact, most high school kids who have it, have low self-esteem because they have been disappointed so many times. They've disappointed themselves and they've fallen short of their goals, and they've been told by adults that they're bad, that they're stupid, that they're lazy, that they're undisciplined. And you hear that enough, you internalize it. And so to come along and say, well, start loving yourself, to say, okay, how? We don't have a pill for self-love. We don't have a pill for self-esteem. But if you don't worry alone, and if you get encouragement from a trusted other, you can still go for help. You can still go and say, look, I'm frustrated, I'm underachieving, I'm more talented than the results would show. Please help me. You don't have to love yourself to do that. It helps if you do, but my gosh, that's setting the bar, I think, unrealistically high. Once you get the help, the positive self-regard will follow. Like I said, I think I don't like the term love yourself because it just smacks of narcissism. That's a curse in its own right. But liking yourself, that's something we all can do. And it's a great thing. You meet somebody, and liking yourself means you can be real. You can say, yeah, I'm not good at this and I am good at that. Yeah, I muck up sometimes, and welcome to the human condition, that you don't have to put on an act. And so many people with this condition putting on acts. They think they have to adopt a false self in order to fit in. That's horrible. It's like walking around with a pair of shoes that don't fit. It hurts day in and day out. You're getting blisters on your soul, and you're hurting your spirit. So by acting, by trying to be someone you're not, you want to get to a point where you accept yourself, like yourself enough that you can be who you truly are and not have to put on an act. And I have found in 40 years of practice and 72 years of life, the best way to do that is in connection. And that's why I say never worry alone. The minute you worry with someone, the fear, the anxiety disappears, and you go into problem solving mode and self-acceptance. And for that matter, you laugh. You say, yeah, I made a foolish mistake. Silly me, as opposed to woe is me and what a loser I am. It's really critical advice, particularly in this age of disconnection where so many people are keeping so many secrets and their true self is buried deep inside. If you just connect and with people you trust and people you like who like you back, and you say, well, I don't know anyone like that. Well, set about finding them. Go to groups, organizations, this group, wherever. Find people who share your interest. Doesn't have to be an interest in ADHD. It can be an interest in dogs. I happen to love dogs. I dedicated my last book to dogs. And I said, it's no accident that God spelled backwards is dog. Get a dog, the world, I just can't say this enough. The world is out there waiting for you to join it. And it's just a matter of finding. My old friend again, Priscilla Vale, used to say, people say these kids and these adults are looking for the easy way out. No. They're just looking for the right way in. The right way in. And the right way in is through connection. That's the key. Find people who understand you, appreciate you, who you understand and appreciate back. And the next thing you know, the whole puzzle begins to come together. And then you find the right help. You maybe you read my book, maybe you get on medication, maybe you switch jobs, maybe you start exercising more, maybe, all the good stuff follows in a context of connection. It's all but impossible to make it happen if you're isolated and alone and afraid.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you so much, though, for your insights and for summing that up so perfectly and neatly. We're going to go to questions from the audience right now. So maybe just a couple or 3 questions from the audience. One of the questions I think is pretty, I think a lot of people who would be considered high functioning. I know the label is a little bit contentious, but people who would be considered high functioning, they are psychiatrists or maybe their bosses or even family members would wonder how they have ADHD, when they did so well in school and when they scored good grades. How would you advise these people to actually advocate for themselves and to say that, no, I need help, even though I might be considered high functioning, even though I'm a CEO, even though I might have gotten good grades in school?
Well, I never forget, I have a billionaire patient in my practice. And one day he said to me, think what I could have done had I had this diagnosis sooner. And I laughed and I said, you've done pretty darn well. And he said, yeah, but at what cost? He said, I worked so tirelessly and wasted a lot of my work because it was disorganized and not properly directed. And I caused other people a lot of pain because I was cruel and impulsively ruthless and really a mean person. And he said, if I'd known about this way back, I wouldn't have been like that because I'm not like that now. And it's not the money that's made me over. It's understanding this condition and managing it properly with medication, with coaching, seeing me, that kind of stuff. So no matter your level of quote unquote success, help will almost always help you. And a big group that doesn't get help is the group represented by that patient of mine, people who are quote unquote at the top, people, and it's usually defined in terms of money, people who have a lot of money who have a, fancy title, people, they don't need help. Well, often they do. And often they're the loneliest people of all because they don't feel permission to speak of anything but power and strength and achievement. And deep down inside, they are languishing, feeling lonely and hurting others. So your level of achievement, you may be a Nobel Prize winner, a self-made billionaire, you may be at the top of the heap by conventional standards. You can still be suffering tremendous pain and, in fact, doing great damage. And the help is there, the same help for you that for someone who is less well equipped in terms of achievement. Just as much as that person needs help, so do you. It's an open store. Anybody is welcome. I go to an Episcopal church in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and during the service, there's a moment where the minister says, all are welcome here, regardless of where you are in your journey through life. You are welcome here. You don't have to believe anything. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to wear anything. All you have to do is show up. Well, that's true of this field as well, and certainly of my practice. Anyone who wants to appear in front of me is welcome, and I will give that person my best. Now, in Singapore, if you want to make an appointment, do it via Zoom, obviously. And I see all my people these days via Zoom. And I'd love to visit with you all from Singapore if you want to see me, or get my book, my short book, remember, ADHD 2.0. But don't take yourself out of the running simply because you're a high, quote unquote, high achieving person.
Yeah. Okay, and maybe one final question to wrap up your very insightful conversation already. Could we find out your view on self-diagnosis? Because there's a lot of TikTok videos and content creators out there putting content about 5 signs that you may have ADHD, for instance. And then users scroll on TikTok or Instagram Reels and they see, oh, okay, I have these 5 symptoms, therefore I have ADHD. Do you think self-diagnosis is valid to a certain extent, especially for people who might not have access or have this fear of going to a psychiatrist? And to what extent would self-diagnosis not be valid?
Well, that kind of thing, and as someone who has put a lot of clips on TikTok, obviously I think it's useful, and go to TikTok and watch my clips. I think they're good. See for yourself. But that's the hook. That's what brings you in. And you can say you've self-diagnosed, but it's what you do with it that matters. Just to watch a few clips or read a few, like you said, 5-step, that may bring you into the room, but it's not going to change much of anything. What you need to do is what I said earlier, is get serious about really learning it, and learning it in terms of who you are. How does this condition fit you? And what kind of changes does it suggest? And that's where working with an experienced expert makes all the difference in the world. It's like, you don't want to go into an uncharted forest alone. You get eaten by a bear, and it's same with the world of ADD. If you go in alone, you're liable to fall into the various traps that are in the world of ADHD, and there are many. So you want to have a guide. You don't want to be so headstrong and impulsive and arrogant, as many of us can be, that you say, I don't need any help. Well, those are famous last words, and a lot of folks, particularly men, say, I'd rather fail doing it my way than succeed with help. Well, that may be okay for Frank Sinatra to sing songs about, but it's not a good way to live a life. When it comes to this condition, it's like entering an uncharted forest that you've never been in before. You really will do much better with a guide. That doesn't mean you do what the guide tells you. It just means you learn from the guide what to avoid, what to go for, and how to get through the forest, not only unscathed, but coming out the other end triumphant with victories, as opposed to beaten up and scarred and run down. It really, really does make a difference. Don't take my videos on TikTok or anywhere else and say, okay, I've learned all I need to learn. Now I'm off to the races. Well, I'm telling you, you're going to lose that race.
Okay, thank you so much. And on that humorous note, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Halliwell. If you guys want to stick around, we will have a chat. Dr. Halliwell, please feel free to stick around. We're going to have a chat with a youth ADHDer called Chong Ing Kai. So he's in his third year of Polytechnic. That means he's 19-year-old. He's 19 years old for those who are joining us from outside Singapore. So Chong, and yeah, he's basically formed a company, which he will talk about a little bit later. He was diagnosed with ADHD as a child, and he has managed to harness his ADHD strengths. So his company is called Stickem, and it has actually won some engineering and entrepreneurship awards, which I will let Kai talk more about.
Thank you, Grace. Let me share my screen real quick. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay, yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Kai, and that's me on the first day of primary 4. I can't remember exactly what happened, but I was probably disturbing my classmates because I was really bored in class. As you can probably guess, I was one of those stereotypical students who hated studying and couldn't sit still in class and always got punished by teachers. However, I really love building things. So much that I like to build air cannons, hazers, and all kinds of dangerous things with my dad. But in P5, something changed. My dad brought me to an engineering good workshop where they used tech to help the disadvantaged. I was immediately obsessed with the idea of my creations actually benefiting society. So I spent the next few years working on tech for good, building assistive wheelchairs and modifying toy cars for kids with muscular dystrophy. It gained quite a bit of recognition, but I think the most important part for me was that I was now spending my time and a lot of my brain power on thinking of solutions. Outside of assistive tech, I also work on other projects that were also impact driven, but in different fields, like coral reef observation. Yeah, so I spent around half a year working on this project, and I was in the lab almost every day. I've always made it a point to keep myself engaged in things that I was interested in. And these were engineering and entrepreneurship. Example, 3D food printing competition. I came up with the idea of a 3D printed plant stem, and I'm honestly not sure how I came up with that link in my head. These different 3D food printed parts were also corresponded with different Indian dishes, and this was completely different from what everyone else was doing. We won the competition, and the Michelin star chef judges were super impressed. And I think this is just another example of ADHD creativity. So in Poly, I also joined the engineering academy stream, where it's less theory and more hands-on. I built stuff like this Iron Man suit during the trials, which shows you how they operate. It wasn't just a written exam or interview to get in. It was really hands-on. And I also made a chameleon grabber thingy, which using measuring tapes as my first project in engineering academy. I would never have gotten the opportunity to do this in JC. Yeah, so it's been around 8 years, and now I'm trying to solve a different kind of problem. After graduating, I started working as a robotics teacher, hoping to share my love for making. However, after teaching almost every age group and every kind of class, I quickly realized that STEAM education was really not accessible to everyone. And not just in Singapore. Singapore's really pretty lucky. About 70% of the global population does not even have access to quality STEAM education.
I just finished doing.
So for us, how we do this is we create extremely cheap 3D printed connectors and chopstick kits, and kids can now build chopstick robots at 10 times the price of Lego. What we really want to do is give children the freedom to turn their ideas into reality and build all sorts of crazy things. Stickem isn't just a cheap robotics kit that you can get from Taobao, because we're trying to build up communities to create lasting impact and getting kids excited about problem solving so that they grow up prepared to solve the bigger problems in society. Kind of like how I started out by simply building things with my dad. So far, we've been pretty good at convincing people to give us their money. We've raised over 170,000 from both government and private organizations, equity-free. More than 700 young thinkers have joined our movement, and this is just the beginning. Our impact goal for the next 3 years is to impact 25,000 children. And the reason for this is because some kids will never even hear about STEAM education. And those who do might not have the opportunities I did growing up. Yeah, so I hope I didn't bore everyone to sleep. Thank you. My name is Kai, and I think we'll move on to the chat part.
Thank you, Kai. Yeah. So, I mean, what age were you diagnosed with ADHD again?
I think I was in primary 2,
Okay.
about 7, yeah.
Yeah, so about 7 or 8, right? I think that's fairly early for, getting diagnosed with ADHD, and it's a good thing, I think. What do you think are the advantages of, getting a diagnosis so early in life and knowing that you have this condition that you can harness?
So for me, the advantages didn't really kick in until I was in secondary school when I entered SST, because that was when I was kind of like mature enough to want to understand myself better. And for example, I would go into online forums and read about why I was feeling certain ways on medication. However, I was still pretty stubborn after getting diagnosed, because I had this attitude that ADHD wasn't a disability and it didn't change anything about me. However, I think it was more advantageous for my parents because they finally stopped chasing me around with the cane, and they were kind of able to connect the dots as to why I was behaving certain ways in school, why I was throwing tantrums at home or doing super impulsive things.
I think that's actually really insightful. So, I mean, since your parents knew, right, from a very early age that you have ADHD, for all the parents here, could you give them some advice? What do you think are some important things that your parents did for you to help you manage your symptoms or actually harness your strengths?
I think the biggest thing was to adapt their parenting style, quite a lot to suit the ADHD. So, some examples would be never giving up on me. They could have pretty easily given up and focused on my sister and just let me fail every single subject, but they didn't. Um, After PSLE, they had much less focus on my studies and academics because it was quite clear that there was something that was interesting to me and just really, really bored me. Some practical stuff was applying for extra time during exams, going to the psychiatrist to get medication, and for like PSLE and every single exam I've had so far, is extremely useful. Then this part might be a bit cringy, but it was also making sure that all my core values were there, like having respect and having empathy for others. Because as I mentioned just now, I was building like flamethrowers and really dangerous things, tasers and all. So after that phase, whenever I have like some idea that I'll go to them and like very excitedly tell them about it, my mom will always ask me this one question, which is, how useful is this for the world? And she always asks me, no matter what kind of idea I'm pitching to her, some like great business idea. And then by asking me that constantly, it kind of makes me think, is this really useful or is this just like something that I'm gonna do, maybe get a bit of money and then doesn't help anyone? They also let they also built on my strengths and let me try everything. So for example, they let me volunteer at a bunch of different places, engineering good, I think some Buddhist temple thingy, a bunch of different organizations. And they brought me to science center events because eventually it kind of started showing that I like to build stuff. I like science and engineering. So science center events really help because it's really a whole wide range of stuff to explore. Um, and then after that, I found something that I really, really like, which is both engineering and entrepreneurship. Yeah, so those are the main things, like a lot of scaffolding and accommodation.
Yeah, and I
with
think that also applies to two of the strategies in Dr. Hallowell's book, right? Which is finding the right kind of difficult and reimagining your environment, whether it's home or in school. And I think your parents did that. I mean, without even knowing these were strategies. So could you kind of share a little bit why for an ADHD it is so essential for them to reframe life instead of sticking to very neurotypical benchmarks? How can actually reframing life help you to progress further?
Mm. So the 2 points you mentioned, the first one is finding the right kind of difficult. For me, that was kind of easier. I think it's much harder for other people because I started out very young. So the right kind of difficult for me was solving problems. After Sec 2, I pretty much gave up on my studies and did the very, very bare minimum to not retain. But that's also because I was spending all my time on engineering competitions and volunteering at Engineering Good. And I remember sitting down with my dad, I think like 1 month before my O level AMF paper, and I told him, "But I'm gonna skip this paper. But then let me explain to you why." And then I gave him all the reasons. I explained the benefits and I showed him that I understand the risk. And then by explaining to him properly and him understanding and saying, "Okay, if you understand the risk, then you can go ahead," I think that kind of communication really helps. And for reimagining environment, I think, I mean, I didn't take the medication route. I think if I had gone to JC, I could have taken medication and spent like 2 years really, really miserable. But for me, a lot of experimentation and self-awareness was needed to really know when and where I'm most productive. I mean, it's more practical, but for example, studying at a cafe versus studying at a library, or what kind of schedule I set myself to do work. And I think the main thing that helped me was figuring out what I'm bad at. Because running a business, you have to really do everything. But for me, because I knew going into the business what I was really bad at, I'm very bad at logistics, details, getting back to people on time. So I found a co-founder that is really, really good at that kind of stuff. And finding someone that was good in that kind of stuff, basically like it cuts away half of the trouble that I have, because if I'm spending all my time trying to figure out the logistics, after I do that, I'm exhausted, then it's hard to function for the rest of the day. So finding someone that's good at that to supplement me really helped a lot. I mean, of course, I'm still learning how to really optimize my productivity. I'm still constantly late for meetings and my room is always still very messy. But I think these are some of the things that really helped me.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you're on your ADHD journey for what? This is your 12th year on your ADHD journey. It's considered fairly experienced. I mean, I'm only on my first year of my ADHD journey, even though I'm older than you. So after, more than a decade of learning about your brain, rediscovering your brain, what are some lessons that you've learned about ADHD throughout your very short life, throughout your ADHD journey or throughout your entire life? And has your perspective changed on any aspect of ADHD in particular?
Yeah, the main thing for me was that I think this one was from the start, but if you treat your ADHD as a disability and you don't really do anything to change your environment or get out of it, then you're going to really suffer a lot. If you figure out what you're good at and what you need to improve on, and you map out your journey. For example, for me, I did with my mom. Figuring out that JC is probably not for me, then this is gonna save you a lot of hassle or like suffering down the line. I didn't do this myself. My mom was constantly sending me resources to look at stuff that was like interesting opportunities, and I needed a lot of help along the way. But then it was also just continuing to learn about ADHD. At the time, Unlock ADHD didn't exist yet, but now that it does, joining a community like Unlocking ADHD probably would have helped a lot. To learn from others and people that face similar issues to you really helps to keep you moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, social support is so crucial for dealing with ADHD, and it's exactly like what Dr. Hallowell said, connection and having friends or family members who actually believe in you, not just despite of your ADHD, but also because of it, because of the strengths that come with the condition and all that. Do you have any final words you wish to say, Kai?
No.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing. I could really relate to your, not wanting to go to JC and like telling your parents why you don't want to go. I did the same, except I omitted that whole explanation bit. So I just chose to go to Poly and not even explain to them why. What keeps you motivated, Kai, on your emotional dysregulated days?
I mean, with Stickum, it's quite simple because whenever we have like a successful program with a social service organization, you see like the kids' reactions, you see how much impact you're making on them. Then honestly, that's enough to get me through like the tough days. I mean, there's not that many tough days because when you set up a good support system and you have friends there, then the tough days are also not that bad.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm quite lucky lah. My team is great.
That's good. How do you prevent overcommitment and burnout though, as someone who is so driven and also the CEO of your company?
Burnout. I think I have micro burnouts where like for maybe one or a few days I just don't want to think. But then also having very clear communication with your team that like, I'm just gonna take a break for a few days. Can you handle this? It really helps.
Yeah.
But you can only feel when you're about to get a burnout because the entire day you're completely busy. You haven't had any thinking time, like unscheduled thinking time. That's when like if it's multiple days of that, then I kind of know, okay, I need to take a few days off.
Also, that's what your burnout feels like. Mine feels like disengagement. So like you just feel very bored and very indifferent. And yeah, it's
Mine is
almost
just
like
I cannot think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mine's like
No
a
ideas,
muted experience of all my usually very intense emotions. Then I know, okay, I need
Mm.
to shut down already. Yeah. Are you currently on meds?
No, I because I'm doing my internship now.
Mm.
No more exams or any. I only take it during exam periods. Because it makes me feel like very zombified. So I don't take it. Now I'm on my internship at Stickum, so there's no need to take it. I think it's better that I don't take it now also.
Okay. We have a few more questions that I don't think I addressed during the talk itself. Yeah, so there were questions on like, do ADHD kids only thrive on medication? Should we be relying on ADHD medication to help us focus? And I think, Kai, your perspective is you don't have medication, right? I have medication, and I think it really helps for tasks where I'm required to just sit down and look through just very tedious, very long documents. Definitely helps. I don't take medication when I go out for events or like when I'm running around interviewing people. Yeah, I don't need medication for that. Because I mean, I think like you, Kai, I kind of thrive off the social energy of, just interacting with people, seeing
Yeah.
people's reactions and all that. Yeah. So that helps definitely. Yeah.
Someone asked, do physical activities
Mhm.
prior to engaging in certain. I don't know about this, but I do go to the gym a few times a week.
Yeah.
I think it
same.
helps to get the extra energy out.
Yeah. Prior to the gym though, like how did you get your how did you cure your hyperactivity?
I didn't.
Hmm. Yeah, and there are also a lot of questions, I guess, from parents and all that who ask how they can help their ADHD child be more organized. Do you have
I think don't nag at
any
them.
suggestions? Yeah.
Help them to understand why they need to fix this habit.
Mm,
Because if you keep nagging at them, then their automatic response is just like block it out. And
yeah.
Not
The more people nag us, the more we don't want to do.
yeah, I still have a lot of bad habits though. Like I'll leave my plate after I eat.
Mm,
Yeah, I won't put my clothes in the laundry.
yeah, same. So I don't have any strategies for being more
Yeah.
organized. It's just live and hopefully, nothing messes up.
Yeah, I think Kai brought up something interesting just now about, sometimes the more people nag, and I think you said the same thing too, right, Grace? You actually feel a little bit like a knee-jerk reaction to oppose. I think that's part of the wiring. I was like that too, and I'm seeing it with my daughter as well. So one of the things as parents maybe that I could share as well is we need to really watch our tone, because we may have a very good heart and good intention, but if it comes out in the wrong tone, our ADHD doesn't hear it, right? Because the wiring is such. Then we just instinctively want to push back, even though actually it's for our good. So it's to come up with more like a suggestion, right? A collaborative approach rather than, this is what you need to do. So that's one of the things I'm learning as well as I'm going along. Anyway, yes, we have closed the poll. Thank you everyone for being here and staying to the end. We really hope that tonight you have picked up some useful insights. And just want to say a big thank you to our guest, Dr. Hallowell, and also Kai. Dr. Hallowell had to wake up very early because when he joined us, it was just before 8 a.m. his time. Thank you, Grace, for an amazing job as a moderator. Very insightful questions. And thank you to the team, Prashant, Esther, Andrea, Raven, Jackie, Li Ming. I hope I didn't leave anyone else out. But you know what? It took a lot of work behind the scenes. So really, really grateful because almost all of us, actually all of us, are ADHDers, right? So we're doing this for ourselves and for the community and for our kids as well. So please keep on supporting us, share our content so that more people are aware about ADHD and how to thrive with ADHD. So good night, everyone, and happy ADHD Awareness Month. If you want to share your story, please let us know. We have a campaign called This is ADHD. We have more videos coming out, so check our social media. Good night, everyone. Keep in touch. See you at the next events. Take care. Thank you.